Hey playa, as you start to build up the number of sexual partners you have, is it true that you actually lose the ability to pair bond, to form deep relationships with people later on because you're wasting it away with casual sex? I hear this argument quite often on red pill channels and in a lot of the comments I receive on the video I made about body count. So let's dive into this idea of what pair bonding is, because the majority of people have it completely wrong. The argument is often laid out like this. Promiscuity by default is bad because the more a woman engages in casual sex, the harder it's going to be for her to form a deeper relationship with someone later on or to pair bond. Now, something people tend to overlook is the fact that humans are not naturally lifelong monogamous. We're actually serial monogamous, meaning we take on multiple different partners throughout our lifetime and usually don't just pick one and stick with them forever. In fact, most relationships generally only last around 2 years, depending on your age, socioeconomic status, and cultural background. And when it comes to relationships before you get married, most people have been in at least 5, with around 4 to 8 sexual partners being the average for men and women. Now, you personally might not consider someone with 8 past sexual partners to be promiscuous. Maybe you're thinking someone with 20 or 50 or a body count of 100 or more. But the real question we need to ask here is, does that body count have any impact on their ability to form a relationship now? I've even heard people make the argument that somehow women release more oxytocin when they have sex, and because of that, as they have more casual sex, it becomes depleted. They lose from their bucket and are unable to replenish it later on with newer partners. And that just sounds like some made up trust me bro type of science out there. Now, if we really dive into what pair bonding actually is, it's forming intimate connections with a partner, meaning it has to meet the 4 criteria of intimacy. That is sex, romance, attachment, and friendship. If it can meet all 4 of those criteria, people are more likely to pair bond with that person. If they're just having casual sex, they're most likely not meeting all 4. And one thing people love to do, whether intentionally or unintentionally, is totally misrepresent the data. They'll take a correlative study and determine that as a causal factor. They'll say because a person is promiscuous or has a high body count, this will lead to this outcome. And you cannot read into it like that, because that's never what the studies actually say. For example, we can look at the research and see that men and women who have more sexual partners are more likely to get a divorce and more likely to report a lower relational happiness. Now, why that is not solely determined by the number of sexual partners. The study is simply showing a correlation to say that people who tend to have high sexual partners might also end up with more divorces. It doesn't mean the two are causal. And I plan on covering the research surrounding the correlation between promiscuity, higher divorce rates, and infidelity in a separate video, but first we need to ask why. Why are people promiscuous? Is it simply because they lack any kind of discipline or self-control or self-respect? Or could it be something deeper, perhaps something genetic? The research shows that your personality and your predictive behaviors are largely influenced by your genetic makeup and your social settings. In fact, if we look at one personality framework called the Big 5, you can actually most likely determine whether or not a person is more likely to be promiscuous. The Big 5 personality traits include openness to experience, conscientiousness, agreeableness, extroversion, and neuroticism. So if you're someone that's highly extroverted, you're actually more likely to end up being promiscuous, to have mate poaching behaviors, and to have low relationship exclusivity. Whereas someone with low conscientiousness and low agreeableness might actually prefer short-term dating and be more prone to infidelity. Now, this all differs depending on your culture and the country you're from and your background, but these personality traits can actually determine a lot about you and your mating patterns. And other personality models like the cluster B disorders, attachment theory, or even the dark triad can help piece together what our potential mating strategy might look like even before we've had sex for the first time. It can help us see whether we'll be more promiscuous, all based on our genetic makeup. So what does that mean exactly? People are more predisposed to be promiscuous, and because of that, they're going to have a harder time pair bonding later on down the line. They're going to use up all their oxytocin with casual sexual partners and not be able to do it with a partner that they actually love and care about. Here's what the research actually says. I'm going to read it to you. Longitudinal data shows that having multiple partners might decrease the immediate likelihood of marriage, but the evidence suggests it doesn't have lasting effects on marriage rates, meaning if a person is engaging in casual sex in the present, they are less likely to enter into a relationship that will lead to a lifelong commitment. You might hear that and think, there you go, if you're engaging in casual sex, you're less likely to enter into a relationship that leads to a lifelong commitment, which is true because sexual activity tends to be seasonal, meaning people will engage in casual sex generally at a stage of their life, a stage that they're experimenting or exploring, or they simply want to do it. But when the time comes for them to make that transition from casual relationships to a monogamous one, the research shows that there's no issue with them in finding a partner and having that lead to marriage. So pair bonding is not affected by a high body count. The person can actually do just fine when they're ready to actually settle down. As long as those 4 intimacy criteria are met, sex, romance, friendship, and attachment, they can form a healthy pair bond with that new partner. They're not inhibited in any way. All this junk science that people throw out there about chemicals being reduced and stuff just doesn't match up with the data. And the data is a little bit more believable than the trust me bro red pill guy just telling you to follow him. Not to mention, it doesn't even logically make sense. For example, women only orgasm 11% of the time whenever they have casual sex. So if they're not meeting those 4 intimacy criteria and they're not even getting off, how are they depleting their pair bonding ability? In fact, it actually reduced it even more if they got into deep committed relationships, hit those 4 intimacy criteria, and then had that person break their heart. That would actually make it harder for them to develop a deep and committed relationship later on, not just having casual sex. But I can already see it now, people angrily writing in the comments, you beta buck, soy boy, cuck, simp, and all these other fun words. If I said something in this video that you disagree with and you have research to support it, type it out. I want to read it. I want to have that discussion with you. Or if you simply disagree with me, write it down below as well. I know this can be a really divisive topic, so I truly do want to hear from you. What I also want you to do is to check out the video over there on the screen, where I'm going to dive into this idea as to whether or not body count should matter. I have my own personal beliefs. I make that case in the video. I want to hear what you have to say as well. On that note, I'll catch you next time. As always, love and peace.